Check podcasts.
The Bread and Butter Collective is a collection of hospitality professionals working together to help strengthen our industry to build strong culture, community, and sustainability.
I'm Kalen McNeil.
And I'm Sam Jones. And this is the Bread and Butter Podcast.
Welcome to the Bread and Butter Podcast. Hey, Sam, how are you?
Again, kind of feeling funny. In a good way, though. I'm feeling great today. It was a stormy night. I slept through it. I woke up to branches and trees, bits all over the road this morning. I'm like, how did I sleep through that?
How did you?
It's a gift. It's a gift. It truly is. I can sleep through anything.
Like, it doesn't matter what's going on in your life.
Children
you can just
crying,
shut it all down.
Yeah, children crying in the middle of the
What
night.
a blessing, man.
I think that maybe that's where I got my training from. 3 kids. And just like, you have to sleep through the night. Otherwise, I couldn't have gotten up to work. So thanks, Heather, for taking all those and teaching me how to
and
sleep.
thank Heather for putting up with you, I would imagine, too.
I wouldn't be here without her.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, I think all great people have a partner that supports them and vice versa.
Yeah,
right? That's
absolutely.
how good partnerships work. As we know in business, it wouldn't work if you didn't have good partners.
Well, then you have bad partners, and then you just, that's no good.
Well, then a good business can just turn sideways all of a sudden. Right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Where you're like, what? This didn't have to go this way. This, we didn't have to, travel down this path.
Yeah.
Right?
How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I've been in a bit of a weird mood. Like, I guess I'm going to say it's probably a byproduct of, the U.S. election and just the significance of what I think will happen in the future and just all the stress around that kind of garbage. It'd be nice to just have some, not have noise and just deal with, what's happening locally and all that. So that's what I'm going to decide to do. Is just focus on our own community. And I think that's where everybody needs to go. I've deleted all of, I used to get these like Reddit threads and all this information and all these people that bloggers and, are all basically churning and making money off all this noise.
Sure, yeah.
And so I just decided to just cancel, unsubscribe to all of that. And then just try to focus on what I can control here. But it really set me back just because of the humanity aspect of it. And it could be, I'm a very dramatic person, so I could be over dramatizing what this is all about. But when you're focused on community and doing, our foundation and all this nonprofit work that we deal with in our business, as well as running a business, it's sort of disheartening because it feels like, you think you're on a mission and all of a sudden you're just like, well, wait a minute, people aren't getting it. Or, you think about climate action and it's a real setback to that overall. The U.S. is such an impactful, and who knows, maybe I'll be wrong, but
well, I think we all feel a real reflection of the social media that we ingest as well. Not to say we're a product of, but we certainly feel that reflection. And I think that we need to touch the ground more with our hands and our feet and tune in less to any social media. Well, Australia, did you know?
I know.
Australia is going to ban social media for kids.
They're trying to, and they should.
They should, but
social
I don't know how
media,
they're going to do it without being a dictatorship country. But
I think
I welcome it.
I remember back in the day. Well, we didn't really have cell phones or anything like that, but you weren't able to bring in like your music, like your ghetto blaster, your Walkman, or whatever.
My
into
teacher
school.
always used to tell me to turn my pager off. I'm like, no way, man. That's business.
Your pager.
It's business. I can't turn that off.
You were selling caffeine. Back in the day.
I run 24/7. School doesn't. No, I'm kidding.
But I've also I deleted my Twitter account. I'm on Blue Sky now and Thread. Like, the thing about it is, like, I think, being aware of what's going on is one aspect of it, but allowing it to pump your dopamine, like, that is the addictive part of it, is the dopamine hit that people get. And I don't think it's healthy for humans to be on that much dopamine all the time.
No,
and
it's overload.
It's overload. And it also substitutes actual learning and dealing with interesting things. Like, you kill a lot of time just scrolling and doom scrolling and looking, and maybe the odd article comes up that makes sense and you're like, oh, that's interesting. But if you read a book, or actually, what I've done because Blue Sky, you can actually curate your own feed,
Okay.
which is really nice because then you can just follow and get into the things that you like. So I like books and interesting topics and things like that. So reading more, and I've also started reading more, which is
that always puts you in a better mind.
well, it
frame, right?
does, and and then as we're gonna segue to our guest.
But I've got a great segue for this.
Oh, do you? Okay, you segue.
Well, I've been thinking about it the whole time you've been talking. I've been like tuning you out, going, "Where's the segue?
Yeah,
Where's the
okay.
segue?"
So you take it out. Take the segue.
I forgot.
Oh my god.
No, it was something about dropping out of social media, touching the earth,
Yeah.
and how do you do that? It's easy if you live in Metchosin like I do. You just
Yeah.
step outside and put your hand in the dirt. But what if you're living in the city?
The concrete jungle.
What do you do then?
Well, I think you could probably look to do some urban agriculture.
Oh,
And that also speaks to community. It also speaks to dealing with what's happening locally. And we've got a guest today who knows a lot about that.
I knew you'd save my segue. Thank
I know.
you.
Well, it's
what
it's
you
what we
do.
do. It's what we do. We do this role. It's like skit.
Yeah, it
know.
feels like it sometimes.
It's a total skit.
Here's a drum roll.
We've got Alistair Howes from Howes, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Alistair Howes from Fed Urban Agriculture. Alistair, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here, and feeling a lot of connection to what you were talking about, both with the feelings recently. I think about some feelings about the world in the future, and at the same time wondering what you can do locally. And I get it really speaks to my job because I get the opportunity to share not just food that's grown locally with people, but the ability to grow food and that putting your hands in the dirt. Like you're saying, dirt's actually at a premium in an urban environment when you think about opportunities to even engage or learn about what it's like to grow food, let alone what it's like to grow food in an urban setting, which comes with its own challenges. But this year I've gotten to share a lot of time with people at the farm and the other work that we do at Fed Urban Agriculture Society and see people, maybe I hope, cure a little bit of that anxiety that you get from the climate and the state of the world by that practical thing you can see in front of you and that soil that you can touch.
Yeah, it's the action part of it, right? Like the actual growing food. Obviously, farming is a carbon capture as well. Full disclosure, I'm a director of the Fed Urban Agriculture. Fed was started originally with myself and Jill Doucette, who runs Synergy Enterprises?
Yes, and Foundation as
And
well.
Foundation. Primarily helping people deal with challenges of climate and all of that stuff. So originally we wanted to create an urban agriculture district in Victoria. And I thought that'd be a cool story. And it's sort of, as, we had amazing volunteers and people that worked in the organization started seeing different areas that we could actually make a difference and what was most impactful. And we basically, or I'd say we, but mostly everyone else but me, steered it into a direction where we're focused on urban agriculture and all that goes with it. So do you want to describe what the Fed Urban, garden is, Fed Urban Agriculture, how you got started in it? And I'd like to know a little bit about your background. So let's go back to you. Where did you come from? How did you get into this area of work? Where did your interest lie? A little bit of a backstory about Alistair.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Alistair Howes. I'm originally from Hamilton, Ontario, and I got into this work from environmental studies classes I was taking at the University of Victoria. So originally rugby brought me across the country when I was looking at universities and thinking about somewhere where, particularly in BC, where you can play all year, but trying to play some rugby while I was going to school. And the ferry ride sold me. I was looking at UBC, and a friend of mine said, well, you got to look at the island, and I was pretty sold right away.
Like-minded better rugby here on the island.
Yeah, our rugby scene here is like
Gotta say.
legendary.
The season is much better,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'll take the less rain. And at that same time, I think also attracted by the like-minded people, the bike infrastructure of the city, the fact that I could see that it was an urban environment that was trying to distinguish itself. It wasn't trying to just be the larger cities of the world, but realizing there is some opportunity for what Victoria can be. And through my time at UVic studying philosophy, I got a lot of opportunities to take a lot of electives and spread my thinking out across some great courses, and was introduced to topsoil at the time by Chris Hildreth, who came in to give a talk after about 3 months of learning about the terrible statistics around the desertification of soil, the amount of forest that's destroyed every year to create new arable farmland, the short period of time it really stays arable, how much carbon gets created by just the transportation of our global food system that's pretty as unjust as it is unsustainable, and to then have somebody in town say, it's a big problem, but I am practically in town, not too far away, trying to solve a part of it. And we would love some help and some volunteers and some interest. And so that looked like a practical way to bring some of my expertise and interest to light. And I think I was always looking for what's the most practical way to make an impact in the world of sustainability generally, but with a business focus on it too. Because I always knew I liked the adaptability and the fast pace that businesses can solve these problems. So it's interesting now that I find myself working for a CRA registered charity that this year has launched a social enterprise that still uses those same values that the urban farm can have as a business to support our other programming, and kind of a beautiful meshing of those two worlds as it looks at to start to change what is an area that could see a lot of change for the environment. There's a lot of tough parts about the climate that's difficult, but food makes up a big portion of our impact on the world, and there's still a lot of impact on how we can change our food as a tool to kind of fix that anxiety you were maybe feeling earlier about the state of our world.
Well, and food's not going anywhere because we all need it. So, I mean, like plastics can go somewhere, coal production can go somewhere, but food can't really go anywhere. Food is something that we all need. So how is the Fed changing how we think about where our food comes from?
Yeah, so I think at the core of that is trying to change it so that it's into the hands of the next generation of people. And as a kind of a core idea, we're trying to make an opportunity for people that are interested in sustainability and the power of food to see opportunities for a career in urban agriculture and agriculture more generally. The average age for a farmer in Canada, but the US and North America as well, is staggeringly old, unfortunately, and only getting older. And you're hearing more and more small individual farms not passing it on to the next generation, not wanting to, and choosing what the real estate market in North America has unfortunately done, which is selling it for larger development, even larger amalgamated farms. It can make it really difficult to keep those small scale operations going. And food isn't going anywhere, but it has gone away in terms of where it's being grown. Vancouver Island used to produce an incredible amount of food and now has about 3 days of food, is some of the more scary metrics at any given time in terms of how much we're holding before it needs to get moved in. And looking at it from a population density, there's still an incredible amount of opportunity to grow food, but where are we growing it and why? What parts of the world are we growing it and why aren't we maybe equalizing some of those systems that have a lot of history behind why we don't maybe grow food here as much as we used to?
We were talking about this last episode. We were talking about the potential independence of Vancouver Island, kind of, right?
Yeah.
And we were saying that we weren't sure if it currently could grow enough food, but I mean, of course it can. It can grow enough food. We're just not growing enough food. Do you know anything about that? Like, what would it take for Vancouver Island to be sustainable with its food development?
Yeah, I think unfortunately, like a lot of these issues, when we talk about system change, a lot of it comes to adjusting the levers and the measurements that make it economically viable to do so. I know there's an example of a farmer in Comox I was speaking to last year, and one thing that was really frustrating for them was that the only viable economic way for them to sell their potatoes at market was to ship it from Comox to Vancouver to get packaged at the place to be then shipped back to Vancouver Island to get sold.
Wow.
And that was their only opportunity to do so for a lot of different reasons, but a lot of the ways, unfortunately, the way our food system's set up and a lot of the subsidies that are at the grocery store that make those prices artificially lower that we give to big agriculture and to a lot of those things create a pretty rigid system that isn't so flexible. So trying to breathe more flexibility into that, but we see the first opportunity into helping young people believe that there's a future in this career and that they can have an effect on what Vancouver Island's food system will look like in the next 30 years is something we're really hoping to drive forward.
Well, I think that's an educational component that's often overlooked, is how do you foster understanding in the growth, the reliant, like I look at all the people that are concerned about the climate crisis, concerned and wanting to do more locally, and we've got this fed urban agriculture garden that is sort of the epitome of actual action. You can actually do something, but even the roadblocks that come into it, like negotiating the lease with the space there and also having that time horizon to develop and grow is always at risk. And frankly, it's hard to make money as a food grower. So you have to pay your bills. So there's that reality of the economics of it. And then you talk about the structural supply chain issues that are just almost insurmountable because it's really hard to get your food at scale to the people that need to eat it in a way that you can actually make money. Right. And, how does a farmer who's making potatoes in the Comox Valley, sell it to someone in Victoria? Like literally, well, yeah, you just described it. It's got to go to Vancouver and then it's got to come back
over here.
And it's disturbing in a lot of ways. I loved your explanation of why you got into urban agriculture and what influenced you. And Chris Heldreth is an amazing example because I think I might have even spoke around that time, and I met Chris probably at the same lecture. And that's where I kind of got sort of tweaked on this opportunity to try to figure out how we could do better. And I always thought Chris's model was really cool and interesting because it built a business case. Alas, when you get through the numbers and the details of it, you still hit that roadblock of consumer acceptance, how much money you can sell your product for, and then also what you're growing. Because I know, for Fed or educate me, certain crops grow better in certain areas, certain times, but also at certain price points.
Yeah,
you can't live on lettuce, crop, but right? Lettuce is a really good product to grow, right? Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not something that's unique to the farm there. Every small farmer, every farmer in the world would tell you lettuce is one of the highest market values, one of the fastest regrowing, but it takes a lot of time and it degrades really quickly. So if we're talking to and the owner of the Fernwood Inn, who's bought a lot of product from Topsoil as well as Fed Urban Farm, when I was asking him, why do you pick us over Cisco? Like, I know it's more expensive, but what is your rationale? I can't imagine it's just value driven, but what is it? And it's that on top of the fact that they like that they can market and talk to the story, this is coming one day away from where it's been harvested, sometimes the same day from our farm, not 7 days away from California, which is where Canada gets over 85% of its lettuce. And so just to think that degrade happens really quickly, that quality difference in a carrot is going to be negligible in comparison. So if I'm selling it for an individual unit, lettuce is often an easier thing to get behind, the difference in quality. But I think that's often because people don't understand the story of it. If you don't understand why it's more important, you can buy quality is enough to deal with that price. But an interesting difference is that now that we are working on a CSA model, which a lot of small-scale farmers use, it's a community-supported agriculture. The idea is you buy a farm share, you get, for us, it's 20 weeks, you get produce throughout that thing based upon how successful the farm is. It's now much easier for me to grow carrots and sell it because it's not so much the individual price unit at an open market where people are getting to buy one or the other. It's that they've already committed to having this food. They said that they want diversity. They don't want to eat to survive off just lettuce, and they're willing to pay for that diversity in kind of a different model than just an individual unit for a price. A carrot's worth this money. It's that they understand why the carrot's there, where it's coming from, that they can pick it up every week.
And it's part of a bigger program and bigger package,
Absolutely.
Right? So you're paying a monthly fee or do you pay it in advance?
You can pay, for the flat rate as we have it installed right now at the start of the season, and then you get your produce. It works out this year. It was about $35 a week is the value that you get back, and we aim to give you about $50 worth of value that you wouldn't be able to get if you, say, went to the grocery store and tried to get the same kind of quality food, let alone locally as well.
And then does a farm decide what is in the mix? Right.
Yes.
So that's how you maybe instead of getting 17 carrots, you might get 6 carrots, but you're getting something else and lettuce, and it's kind of part of the whole package. So now that carrot, if you sold it on the street, it would be like going back to your drug dealing days with your pager. I'm assuming that was what was going on, Sam.
Yeah. 25066.
So just so you can understand that you're not selling it for $15 a carrot. You're selling it for maybe maybe that's too big a number. Maybe you're $5 a carrot. You're selling it for $8 a carrot because you're bundling it with all this other stuff and they're prepaying. Mm-hmm. So they're just happy to get some diversity in the mix. And
with that prepaying, how does the math work? Because if you give a farmer $10,000 in the spring, and they go out and they plant what they think they're gonna get, they're having to guess about the growing season coming. They have to guess about how much of that product is going to be eligible to sell back. So how do you determine how that $10,000 gets divided up amongst the boxes per month if you don't know ahead of time? Or does the farmer have to take a gamble on that?
There is a little bit of the gamble, and it's more just for the clarity of it, it's more individual shares. Like someone could buy enough shares to equal a $10,000 value, but usually it's about a set amount for this is one share worth, whatever that associated price is. Okay. We had about 67 shares this last year that came. So one thing that's helpful is that there is a lot of guesswork that goes into farming in general. Because we're growing in these geotextile containers on top of what was formerly an industrial site, my entire farm is broken up into 3,000 individual units of containers that are a uniform size, a uniform height, a uniform capacity for growing, and I happen to have 6 years of data on all of the growth that each of those rows have done. So there's guesswork to be done, but a lot of the farming is mitigating that guesswork through previous experience. It's helpful in an urban farm because you can add that data capture, but the other part of this CSA model is it's not so much the amount of carrots, what much I plant them. It's that if I'm trying to sell to Big Wheel Burger 300 pounds of carrots, and they have to change over their spring menu to accept those carrots, and they're probably going to want a pretty consistent rotation of how many carrots there are so that they can keep that menu up, be able to use them practically. If my carrots end up being 2 weeks late, that's a big problem for a restaurant who's planning to change their menu over. It's not so much a big deal for my CSA members. If they don't get carrots until week 3 versus week 1, they don't seem to mind as much, and they can understand why. I can show them the row. I can tell them that it's been slower than it's used to have been. We expected it here, and people really like that connection. It's just not something you can do with restaurants because they are running a business themselves. So that's where we keep our lettuce as one of our premium products that's always available, and we fill those regularly. So restaurants can rely on that. It's that kind of consistency getting out the door that's a big determiner.
And is it hydroponic indoor grown?
No, it's all outdoor grown, in soil based. So the big idea is that we don't own the land that we're on. It was formerly a contaminated site. Doesn't have any impact on us because we're growing entirely above ground in these containers. But we're able to invest in the organic practices of our soil so that when we take them with us, we have incredibly healthy soil that we have data on, that we know how to grow with, that work into our business plan, not a hypothetical of what you could grow. We can really expect it. So it helps us justify investing into that soil because the soil is ours. We would take it with us when we eventually move, as the model is designed.
That's all in the container.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And how many containers do you have going right now, and how many different locations are you in Victoria?
Yeah, so the main farm site is roughly 3,000 containers on 20,000 square feet. It's pretty sizable. We do about 300 pounds of restaurant greens a week on top of the other sales that we'll do for our CSA members, restaurant partners, and then this year we actually were able to do a corporate CSA with Big Wheel Burger as well. So part of their managers benefits programs received a CSA veggie box, which is really great for us because we were able to package them all together and deliver them. And then I got to chat with a couple of the managers, and they seemed pretty excited about us. But that would be just another example of another revenue stream option that we balance between all of those. So consistent restaurant sales is happening all the time at that restaurant, and that's all part of the social enterprise of Fed Urban Farm. The larger Fed Urban Agriculture Society also manages rooftop gardens that are just for donation at the Songhees Wellness Center rooftop and the Pandora Homeless Center Society just on Pandora Street, just by Vancouver as well. And both of those support the on-site food programs that happen in those kitchens.
And is that above Our Place Society, one of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's actually one of the best rooftop spaces we've been able to have access to in terms of the security, access, and kind of the creative freedom we've had over the last 3 years to find out what works best in that space as we try to balance time spent to the productivity at the garden. It's not worth an unlimited amount of labor, but refining our system as we look to transform some more rooftops around town.
So are they responsible for some of that management of the farm up there as well? Like, is the Fed Society taking care of that for them?
We take care of all the harvesting, but I still have a great relationship, particularly with, I've noticed all of these gardens, whether it's a school or anywhere else, you need to get the maintenance guys on your side, the maintenance staff on your side in general. Just happens to be some guys at Pandora, and they're very helpful. Let me know when the water shuts off. They check in on a Friday. I still am pretty happy with the amount of effective hours we've been able to use for that program, but it does always take a couple other extra eyes. But it's interesting how much the work is balanced and how much people there love getting to go up to the rooftop and take a break and check on the garden and feel connected for their staff.
We
can't offer it to the residents there, unfortunately, just because of the accessibility issues, but their staff really do appreciate the opportunity on top of the food. So it's been a great program for us.
The whole mental health component of it too, like being outside, watching something grow and just touching the soil, basically touching the ground, is pretty amazing. I've done some tours out on the farm, and it's amazing. If you're driving in Victoria, you go over the Bay Street Bridge, look to your left, and you see the farm there. It's amazing. That farm is one of the best locations, to sell the story, but also see it in action. Now, is there a capacity to do other rooftop gardens? Like if you're owner of a building and you're like, man, I really want to get into this. Is that something that Fed has capacity for?
Yeah, it's funny you should mention. I actually just finished a kickoff meeting launching our program to formalize our ability to create rooftop spaces, both for community members and community organizations, but also for private businesses and just individual companies, building owners, anywhere that has a rooftop space that we're trying to transform. And what we're excited about is honing in on the different options. It's always tough to retrofit spaces where maybe the roof wasn't designed with growing food, soil, and extra weight on top of it. But even in those instances, we're looking at aeroponic growing towers that are incredibly small in terms of the weight, but still quite productive. We have down at the urban learning garden that Fed manages and helped create as well, we have much larger life spaces style planters that have water reservoirs. If organizations or businesses have a more permanent space, we're trying to do some more space creation. Office patios are things that we've done with people like Destination Greater Victoria last year. So a lot of ad hoc little projects that we're hoping to formalize together in a nice offering for the 2025 season.
Are bees part of this formula?
So bees are an interesting one because you have to differentiate between honeybees, which
Look at you coming out. Look at you.
It's like I prepared all week for this.
It's like, look at you coming with these zingers,
Well,
man.
I
That's
tell
awesome.
you, man, when I'm interested in something,
I'm
naturally
this is
interested.
why you're essential to the podcast.
Yeah, so pollinators are like a really interesting focus for us. The corridor that used to have the Fed Eco District with all of the restaurants that Kalen was speaking to earlier was just transformed this year into a native pollinator corridor, trying to create a corridor of eco space that plants can either offer foraging or food opportunities to pollinators, but that one's looking more at native pollinators. So everything from your native mason bees all the way down to native flies that have some of your highest heat resistance. So working in an urban environment where we're trying to bring some life into spaces covered in brick and concrete. I actually am a big fan of the flies these days, which some people always find a little odd. But the honeybees are more of an agricultural product, and we do work with some people around town that do urban beekeeping. The other option are the more native bee house styles that they replicate the ground foraging that mason bees or solitary bees are. So not your big nests and your classic style, but individual ones that would usually be burrowing into the Garry Oak meadows that would have surrounded Victoria and the surrounding Southern Island that don't exist, especially in urban environments. There's instead these very beautiful wooden boxes that have been created by I Used to Be a Pallet, which is a lovely business gentleman in town who creates restructured lumber. And he's made native bee homes for us. They have little homes so you can see them forage, stay in for the winter, and then eventually leave it in the spring when they're out to go pollinate. So really hoping to help a bunch of the pollinators in the urban environment. It's kind of another interesting area for us on the horizon.
I bet. You know how Victoria has all these hanging baskets on every light post? Why not make those more conducive to bees, or make them full of food?
Absolutely.
Or both?
Yeah, a big part of those is that we, just by the aesthetics and Victoria being the garden city, they're often European-styled aesthetic plants that we're looking at. And there's some interesting stuff. We collaborate a lot with the North American Pollinator Partnership Alliance. And so it's a North American-based organization that works to support pollinator health, both agricultural honeybee production, but also native pollinators as well. And they've done some incredible research that show kind of the staggering lack of support that those aesthetic hanging baskets in general offer, and something we're looking at is to look at what are we doing in our urban environment and what small changes, like difference of seed, difference of type of flower, difference of a little education to explain why this looks a little different, how much impact could we change when we're spending a lot of time making these corridors not too far off those hanging baskets that are going right up government.
Yeah, and often I think about those baskets in the past, going, what a waste of energy to go water them with a big truck and labor and all those things, and because they're just flowers. They're pretty. Granted, they're pretty, but they're useless. So maybe if we had something that was beautiful and useful, then we could say it's okay maybe to put all that labor into keeping them watered, and the trucks have to drive.
Well, they're serving a higher purpose. I think talk a little bit about, as we talk about the pollen, I want to get back to the city component too, because I think we actually have an opportunity with this city council, the city of Victoria, and their desire. I mean, they already have like a zero waste program. They're very engaged with climate action, and it's not just focused on plastic straws to paper straws, which let's not get into
you
that.
really know how to get
Get Sam going here. Poke.
Yeah, and I think I've seen just on the flowering baskets to the point for the city that I've been really impressed with since the pandemic. Fed delivered the MyFed Farm program. So 3 to 5 of the same containers that we use at our farm, giving away to people who are in need either from the psychological or mental health point of view of the isolation or just the food security point. And that's a program that's evolved and adapted over the years, something I really enjoyed being a part of. And that one was made possible because the plant component was provided for free from the city. So the last 4 years, they've cut half of their usage of the greenhouses. They're at Beacon Hill Park, I believe, and they're now growing plant starts. So they grow, it's an incredible number. I wouldn't even want to guess just because I think I'd get it wrong. They grow an incredible number of plant starts that they give away to community for free at 2 different times, every time throughout the season. And just reusing, probably someone looking at those hanging basket cultivation greenhouses that are down at Beacon Hill Park during the pandemic and wondering, could this be a little bit more supportive for our community? And it's a program they've continued to support and something that's been a real beacon of light, allowed us to run a lot more programs supporting it as well. And hopefully something that, to your point, that we'll be able to continue with our current round of councillors as well.
Yeah, and I think that is an example of I'm not a missed opportunity by City of Victoria, an actual identification of an opportunity where they stepped up and very low key. Like I don't think anybody talked about it. I think I learned about it a year after, and I'm involved in the organization a year after it was already established. And I'm like, wow, yeah, they're just donating all their plant starts. And I was just like, wow, that's amazing. And they're like, oh yeah, no problem. Right. And I don't think they understand even at the time, like the significance of what that means as a city too. And maybe there's other cities doing it. Now, getting to the pollinator thing, are we dealing with just urban sprawl as relating to the decrease in pollinators, or is this a climate crisis byproduct?
Yeah, I don't think it's a sprawl issue just because of how prominent it is in Victoria, which seems like one of the few cities that has a unique opportunity to combat the sprawl, just with how tight a border the municipality is and a lot of those restrictions getting into places like Fairfield. I think it's more an issue of placemaking and community in downtown spaces. I know I've heard a lot about small business owners. I know you guys have chatted a lot about it too. The downtown business community or the downtown community of people isn't often seen as a neighborhood as much as the surrounding neighborhoods of Victoria are. And to that point, it's often seen as a way to provide services, getting cars through, moving things, practical, not so much a space that people are going to walk their dog and interact with. Yeah, absolutely. And in Victoria is definitely the kind of commuter city that has a lot of that. And so I think trying to see our downtown spaces as expressions of our values and practical as well. Like we deal with in flash flooding and asking people to take the leaves out of the drain covers when we don't install a lot of rain gardens for a city that gets incredible amounts of rain in short periods of time in our urban environment. So I think it's more building that placemaking and practicality that ecosystems provide services, and they're services that we can utilize if we build those ecosystems into our cities as well.
Wow, it's so interesting because you do see a lot of, when you see the new development, they're putting out these rain gardens, and I know where Zambry's restaurant is outside. They've got and that's been there since 2010, which at that time I was like, well, what is the purpose of this and all of that stuff? Not quite getting the significance of it, but that's really driven by. Is it driven by the city or is it driven by the developer? Like, is this being mandated now? Like this sort of component in developments? Have you seen more of?
I wouldn't say it's so much mandated, but it makes me think about bringing it back to the earlier conversation when you were asking about how could we see Vancouver Island getting more sustainable from a food perspective. And I think it's about incentivizing developers, not so much as mandating it. And I think leading the way from a city perspective. I know that Blanchard, they're in talks about running a new resurfacing and restructuring of Blanchard Street right by Zambries. So it would actually put an island boulevard in the middle of the street with a planting opportunity right on the corner of where that is, right corner of Zambries as well. So I think developers are more interested in coming into areas that have those kinds of visions as well. But at our farm, one of the things that we're missing and trying to work pretty hard towards getting next year is we aren't a tax status farm at our farm. So we are there paying a lease out of BOSE is inclined and sees the mission values and understands the support of having us there. If we were able to cover that pretty small box, if we're being honest, just to get it to be reviewed, assessed, given that this is a farm and that won't have any impact on plans to build later on, that status can be shifted, which we have been able to confirm. It could mean I wouldn't want to speak to numbers, a very sizable cut in taxes for a developer that now doesn't just have a mixed use space, has land that they're letting be arable farmland. It would be
So interesting.
the flick of a switch, but it would be the difference between knocking on developers' doors and having developers knocking on our doors, being like,
Yes. Yeah.
looking at
I like that.
the rail yard, across from the farm within a stone's throw. There's also a old gas station with tanks under the ground that it's too expensive to tear up, so it's being used as a parking lot right now that's barely full. If there's 5 places I could throw with a stone and hit in Vic West alone, and know that there's more in the region, across Vancouver Island, across everywhere that we've had industry for a short time and left. We are sitting on formerly a sawmill, and formerly before that, what was guaranteed to the Songhees and Esquimalt nations as a reserve land from 1854 treaties with Sir Douglas that have been displaced and moved. It's a really sad history of the site that we're on, but it's not unique. And that can be a sad story that's important to tell, but it's also an opportunity. Where are similar opportunities going to be for degraded land that can't be built on? For ours, it's contamination reasons, but there's a plethora of them. And what can we do with them in the meantime for communities that might want food security, education opportunities, greening of their urban spaces? Trying to think of what we can offer as a farm when we're talking about those ecosystem services.
I got so many questions. I'm a total.
Alistair, you're a star
Ignorant,
for
yeah.
starters, and I knew you were, but like it's probably been a year since, or maybe even less than a year since I've heard you talk about the land and the way you talk about it. Because not only is it educational, it's very inspiring because of the possibilities. Just before Sam jumps in, I want to hone in on the tax component of it. How do we move that forward? Like, how do we connect those dots so that there can be tax benefits to the landowner in leasing it, so that it reduces the cost for the farm, I'm assuming, right? Because then they're getting the tax benefit. It becomes a tax credit to them as a business,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, that would be the idea. Yeah, and that's when I think about, like I was talking about at the start about the why, I like the impact of urban agriculture, but I would be a fool to say that one urban farm is not having the kind of impact that I would love to have in terms of transforming a food system. So trying to think about what can we do as we look to grow the number of opportunities for these kind of things. And not necessarily that's us creating 10 to 15 more farms, but how can we empower others to have just as many opportunities and multiply that impact? Right now, I think it's to be the flagship and show case what can be done.
Possible.
And so I think part of that's that farm tax status, but part of it's also following up the research study that Fed did, the Street to Sky program, where they reviewed and looking at topsoil at the time when it was a distinct entity, the urban farm that's now Fed Urban Farm, combining with them, Chris, at the time, and asking developers, like, why not more? Like, what is the barrier? What's stopping it? And at the time, even without those tax status opportunities, the main response was, we're not willing to take a gamble on somebody that is starting their first business, let alone starting a business in urban agriculture that isn't terribly proven. Sure, one farm has been successful, but this is a big branding, marketing liability. And so we're now looking at, well, how can we offer support, education, a program that can get people off their feet, just like the Project Zero program, which is a sister non-for-profit organization that works on taking businesses off the ground that are trying to turn waste into productive means. We have a lot of shared expertise. How can we run similar programs where we can help urban farmers get off their feet and start their own organizations with the backing, the support, the data that we've been able to collect over years? If we can start adding some of those tax incentives as well, I think it'll be a little easier to get there. But that multiplication, I think, will only happen if we can prove everything that's possible with this farm and the success that we're having. And I think once we can start supporting the creation of others, we could have, in my ideal world, a pandemic where you're not going to start 10 farms out of nowhere, but if you had 10 urban farms, it might be a lot easier to create 100 in a short time if everyone's
right. Yeah, the
amplifying
example's
that
been
impact.
made. I think the thing with the super interesting, and it didn't occur to me. I love when I learn something cool that also I may have some control to, I can contribute my skill set to try to make it happen. And that's the tax kind of thing, and advocacy, and even changing the perspective of the developer, because we have so much land that is holding land. I own land in Courtenay, and we try to build a building there forever, and it is an old gas station. It's got its environmental, but it isn't great. I know that you spoke when I was touring the farm a few months ago about potential benefit of reclaiming land that is previously unused by having a farm, where the spill that's coming down through it kind of regenerates some of the soil there. Is that still, is there people studying that? Is that still an opportunity?
Yeah, so at the site that we're at 395 Harbor Road, the quick history of it was that it was originally underwater. Then a rail line was split up that runs along the Galloping Goose Trail. And then after that rail line was set up, they infilled the rest of it after they made a bit of a diamond of the water. So we're on formerly infilled land that then had a sawmill, some of the hardest chemical contaminations. I mean, not the worst, but some pretty significant stuff you're dealing with. What we use to support our soil health is that we create natural, incredibly high quality compost. Sometimes it's so active you need to water it in the summer or else it can spontaneously combust.
Wow.
Just that's organisms warming over top of each other. That's just all that energy. But you can't always keep adding soil on top of carrots. At a certain point, your containers get too full. So what do you do? How do you share those nutrients? You make a compost tea. You take cheesecloth, just like a loose leaf tea bag. You suspend it in water. You let all of the anaerobic microbes spread into the water. Water your crops with that. We've realized, and what the Stantec engineers who are managing the soil and will do a soil test on the site afterwards are wondering is that seemingly by having organic compost containers that water is running through all of the time, we're doing effectively the same thing underneath our soil. And what we've noticed on an anecdotal level, when I look at the aerial pictures, are very fun looking at what was a purely green site. We now have 4 very substantial pollinator gardens that we've been able to create through both waste product from the city and leaf mulch and wood chips on what was as dead a gravel as you could get, like completely unalive. If you can think of your perfect moonscape space is what it was before. And we are truly breathing life into the space as we're there. From just, I think, a visual and anecdotal walking by, you could say it's a little bit more lovely, but what's that data going to say once we're done? And does that change the number of how much it costs to remediate the site before construction? Will
Or
be
if it
really
even
big.
needs to be.
Or yeah, absolutely. There'll definitely be some, it's probably hard to fight heavy metals, but even just that little switch, something that can help improve it, even still just to say, even if you had to remediate a site over a long time, could you put a supporting business that can make money on top of that wasted space for an interim amount of time? Feels like possibilities that get me excited for sure.
Right.
Wow. It's so, I find that just like, this is the kind of stuff that I love about this space, because this is, we talk about business and entrepreneurship. This is an element of an entrepreneurship that is primarily nonprofit, right? Or it is nonprofit. I mean, the only way, even if you're a for-profit farmer, it's a nonprofit, right? Because there's no profit to be made.
Yeah.
But to integrate solutions not only for the climate, but reclaiming land, you've got a tax component, but you have a great opportunity for enlightened government to actually get behind and support, as well as business partnership, to try to use this land. I mean, you see all this land everywhere. I'm sitting on it right now. And so how do I get an urban garden on my land up there so that not only am I doing something good for the community, but I'm doing something good for the land. There's a business case for it. And even if it's, even if it's cost me money to do it, which I'm totally fine paying, there's a higher purpose, right? Because, when it comes to eventually, if we ever sell the land, getting a better case for a higher profit from that action. And perhaps there's some tax incentives too. We spend $10,000 a year just sitting on that land. The way the building costs have gone, we can't build a building. We could build a building for $5 million and rent it for $40 a square foot when the Courtenay market is a $15 a square foot market, right? So everything is just flipped on its butt. So if I sell it, I'm going to take a pretty big loss because we spent a lot of money on the development. But if I can hold it and also do something good, that to me is like, I could hold that thing for 10 or 15 years or even longer, if it means that it's producing something and I'm doing better for it.
Well,
so
you're kind of mitigating your losses that you had.
Well,
you're
all
making
profit is not about just making money. It's about giving back and doing good for the community, for the world we're in. And this is what gets me excited, because you can make a really good argument. There's other ways to make money. We have other businesses. There's other things that are paying our bills. But if I get to participate in something that is kind of changing the way the world behaves and sees these things, then I think that's exciting. It also can get other landowners on board.
Yeah,
right.
I remember you were talking earlier about the dread about the world, remembering that the reconnecting to your local spot can be the most powerful thing, and that's a different kind of investing, I suppose. It might not be the most money-making venture if it's done right, but I could imagine a community might be more receptive of a new person coming in and owning land if they were excited about asking the community what they could do with it and how it could support them.
When you look at some landowners here, property owners like the Jaws, for example, who always look to do right first, and then they figure out how to make profit for themselves. They do. They're a very profitable company. They own a ton of land in Victoria, but they're giving back to the community in ways that they're ahead of their time. And I see this kind of stuff that we're involved in and working on and talking about today as excellent opportunities. And if we can just put it together in a case and just dot those I's and cross those T's on all those details about, that I never even considered about the tax incentive and why aren't we able, by doing this, to get a tax incentive for the actual landowner? Because that makes the case for holding land for higher purpose and doing other things way more appealing versus just forcing something that the community may not want, need, or do. And if you're creating these hubs of sustainability and food security,
if you're
like
able to put a farm on an existing building and offer the landowner a tax incentive, I would want to see that tax incentive not just go to the landowner, but permeate through to all the tenants that landowner has on that land. Like, it would almost.
Well, that's typically what happens, because if you own the building, the tenants through their triple net,
right,
they're paying the tax. So if you do
it
a
can't
heritage
just
registration,
be an incentive just for the owner. It has to be for
the
building
owner,
and the community around that building, because that's what the farm's good for, right? For the community.
Yes, but the thing about it is also understanding how the mechanics of it work. So this, as much as say your in vacant land, is different than an actual building. So you got a building, the tenants are covering the taxes.
Yeah.
So all the taxes are there. So the owner of the building is like, well, it's neutral to me, but it also makes their renting and their property more appealing if you've got a tax incentive and it makes the businesses more successful.
Let alone an additional service. If greens can be bought on site, or if you have the ability to have a farm in the rooftop of your building. There's interesting stuff that, at least the way the ruling's written right now, from my understanding, the big minimum is a $10,000 revenue production, improving that. So if we're talking about those vertical aeroponic towers in a rooftop space with maybe some supportive heating and some infrastructure, I wouldn't be surprised if you could do it with 100 square meters. And so if you start thinking about, as BOSA is, which has been great, one of the first things they do when they bring someone to the showroom to show them the condo afterwards is bring them down to the farm that happens to be right in their neighborhood.
Yeah,
they get to be a part of. And so for also trying to realize, the community members there will definitely be very sad when construction begins on our site and we have to move. But what could be done in terms of looking at the design of their upcoming buildings to make sure that there might be a kind of home for us in the future? And maybe if it is indoor, because you were asking about earlier, are we growing indoor? It is just outdoor growing. Could we be more productive in a smaller space? Could we be just as productive in a smaller space? What could that look like? How could we envision agriculture being different on a rooftop perspective? And this farming model that you'll see just south of the Bay Street Bridge, a stepping stone, I think, to get to those more permanent, really transformative. What could our world look like if food production was done on the rooftop of the building that we all live in?
Yeah, that paints a real interesting picture of the future, doesn't it? Thinking that how much more sustainable, like if every building that could, every flat top building that could had a farm, and it all went to a central or very hyper local yet central location for like the block or the building or the community at large. That's an amazing future to think about.
Yeah, it's a lovely hypothetical. You start thinking about mitigating, the heating, you're already doing all the services you're already providing to buildings. I think the big case for urban agriculture and that vertical indoor is the future permanent of urban agriculture. I really do believe, but it's about, for me, trying to make sure, how are you going to take advantage of the climate mitigation and energy that's already being spent? We're not going to spend a ton of money mitigating the climate impacts on the countryside. Unfortunately, it just won't happen. We will in cities. We will in buildings. If there's going to be a place that's going to be on a landslide, earthquake mitigated, have a foundation for it, it's going to be more likely to be in our urban environments. All those things that we can build upon when we look about trying to add this asset. Is a building already heating and cooling itself? Is there already water capture going on top of this Leeds building? How can we piggyback on those sort of solutions?
Which you can all improve on with agriculture on the roof. You can tie that into the air return system, water, heat, all those things.
Absolutely, and hopefully, to your point too, get to see some benefits for whether building owners, builders, developers, the people living in them. So we can see some more incentives for it. Absolutely.
With such an interesting angle that I think it's underappreciated for sure. So how do we get that story out, and how do we move this along quicker? Like what do we got to do, Alistair? Who do I got to kidnap? What do I?
Or are we on the kidnapping checklist
Sure,
again?
we go over drug
okay,
dealing to
hold on.
kidnapping.
Let me pull up
As
my
long as
notes.
we're using
I've got this
pagers
list
for
going
it.
already.
And we'll do it all on pagers.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, maybe not anymore.
Well,
I think if we think about what needs to happen is a pathway needs to emerge for people to see a future in agriculture.
Yeah.
From a very outside perspective, I think the people looking at the incredible amount of applications we get when we open up job postings for the year, the amount that come particularly from UVic and post-secondary education, where they're learning a lot about the world and why this is a solution in a world where they aren't seeing a lot of practical solutions. We have to show people that a way to transform that climate anxiety or the world anxiety that I think we were both feeling at the start of the podcast as well, that you can use food as a tool to change and to use it to reconnect with one another, because we're very disconnected from our food system when we walk into the grocery store, but we're very disconnected from one another when it comes to food as well. And so
totally.
you can reconnect with the soil, but oftentimes you can reconnect with one another through the growing of food, the being around food, something we've gotten to see this year as we run workshops open to the public or working with schools to bring them down and learn about growing food. It's that connection between one another that's, I think, most special about food, and I think why a lot of restaurants have seen people and youth and passion see the value of food, kind of that whole wraparound perspective of it. So kind of capturing that anxiety and turning it into a passion and some belief. I think maybe from an outside perspective, it sounds a little broad, but I think it could be what we need.
Is there any tie-in with your organizations and group of organizations to addressing the Monsantos of the world, the big agriculture of the world that really does feel like it's the problem? It's the very basis of our health issues is the food that we eat. So is there a way and is there a mechanism in your organization that's addressing that or has a plan to do something about that?
Yeah, I'd say at this point we aren't very much in the large scale agricultural space in terms of the changing policy advising. That's something I think I'd love to see us get into. But I think what we can offer, maybe at a more smaller scale, is trying to find the restaurants, and they seem to be more and more apparent, that understand what Monsanto is doing and why they don't want to have that. And I think there isn't a chef I've talked to in town when I go around on my bike with my samples of greens that doesn't want to buy from us. But oftentimes, if it's not the price, it's the convenience. And so that's the convenience voice that as a business, Topsoil, before Fed acquired it, really tried to focus on. We can't fight the price difference, but we can have better quality. But when this chef orders it on Friday, the thing about the Cisco truck and the thing about Monsanto, it'll be there. It'll show up. It'll be there. It'll be consistent. The invoicing will get done. It's reliable. And so trying to figure out that if we're trying to replace, and maybe not replace because that's not really the real thing, we're trying to shift and disrupt a space, we need to be bringing something different, but we need to realize that what the food system's amazing at is convenience. And so trying to find a way that all of these things, there is a story, people are willing to pay more, but they're often not willing to pay more and be inconvenienced by it. And so trying to find ways for us to allow people to use their food as a tool of climate change and climate justice without really having that big negative impact on the fact that we all happen to live our lives around food, and those relationships are slow to change.
So how do you adjust for that? Is it a volume issue for you? Because if I order greens, and if everyone who wants to order greens in Victoria orders greens from you, you're going to be out of greens pretty soon.
Yes, absolutely. And luckily, I'm not the only person that can do that, but we have a lot of interesting systems that are kind of developing, like the Southern Vancouver Island Farm Hub, where they've centralized the distribution for as many local farmers as you want. And it's a very casual experience in terms of there are fourth revenue stream. If I have too many carrots on Thursday, I can let them know, and it will go into an online catalog that can be selected by anyone from the general public. You can just go and select, do you want 1 pound of my carrots? If you want carrots from this person over here. It's a very lovely central marketplace for local food, and it is, from what a lot of people I'm hearing, it's only in 2 or 3 years in its infancy. It's probably the closest thing to a grocery store alternative, and so I think trying to look at that experience for the average day consumer. A farmer's market is great, but it's not convenient enough or available enough.
It's not
to replace
accessible.
it.
Yeah, I mean, you got to go there on a Saturday, and if you're busy on a Saturday, you can't do it. You got to get something that's open 7 days a week. I think that's always been a barrier. I know from the restaurant perspective, it's always been a barrier. And me, for the business guy, I'm like, okay, the farmer is literally wrote some chicken scratch on a piece of paper, and that's their invoice. And I'm like, okay, I can't read that number, so that's $120 that I have to go spend half a day trying to figure out who do I pay because I can't read who it is. Right. And then they don't bill you.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, man, I know we've been eating, how do I? And they're like, oh, you owe us $1,400. And it's like, okay, well, just send me a bill.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I'm out in the garden getting sun and my planting and all this stuff, which...
What farmers do you work with?
I'm going back to 25 years of dealing with this.
The reality
right?
of farming has become really distinct from the world of business. I think because farming's had a real time trying to stick it in the world of business.
Yeah.
Now that we've transitioned this farm from being a private business to a non-for-profit that's a social enterprise, we're realizing we're receiving a lot of the benefits by being a non-for-profit as a part of a registered charity that wouldn't be available to farmers. We offer so many community benefits by being a farm, let alone being an educational farm that can offer outside opportunities for people as well. But the farms, just by attracting the bees and birds and supporting the soil and helping with water capture, they're doing a lot of things that we don't pay them for.
And I've never met a farmer who wouldn't sit down and tell you what they're doing. They love teaching.
I mean, the farmers are amazing.
And if you could find somebody too, but just like that, our rural populations are decreasing. We're having a lot more urbanization. There's a lot less youth that are in general, let alone in rural areas. It's just a reality of a lot of that education is ending with a lot of these really knowledgeable people. But it is something that our model, as an inverse, trying to systematize and support and create something that's replicatable, so that it's not just all in my brain of when the carrots need to get planted at the farm, because it should be shareable. We should be spreading that knowledge as much as possible.
Open source.
Open source.
I think one of the things when you talk about the Monsantos of the world and this, it really change starts in your backyard. I think the story has so many layers because you've got a tax incentive, you've got a food security incentive, you've got an educational, you've got the beauty of it because it is a beautiful looking piece of real estate. You've got the story. So I think that is the opportunity. I know the Impact Conference is coming in January, and that ties into tourism. It ties into selling your story to the world. Like, why are people coming to Southern Vancouver Island? What is interesting here? And this is an example of what could be amazingly interesting. It's scalable in a way that provides revenue and income to the community that we're around and jobs effectively. And just needs better support. Like, it just seems like people aren't thinking about it in the ways that I'm thinking about it, right? Because if they were, you talk about this carbon taxes. You talk about this stuff the government is doing. We're going to do carbon taxes. Okay, that sounds really sexy, carbon tax. Like, how is that impacting? And then you get caught up with this paper straw, plastic straw thing and the plastic bag. And, you're just doing all this energy. You're spending all this money, creating all this stuff that makes very little impact. And very little impact in our world and very little impact in the greater world. When you can actually get behind this type of project that actually spins off in so many different areas and actually makes you feel like you're actually doing something.
Yeah.
And that makes me realize, answering your question earlier about what can we do about Monsanto, we can do a better job of storytelling. And I think there's been a lot of storytelling in food about what's wrong. And it's very clear, and that's really important work. But there isn't enough storytelling where people end the film and go, I'm really excited to eat local food, and I'm going to believe in that impact. And it really does have an impact, even though it's incredibly small. Eating local food, the increases in pollinator health, supporting ecosystems, there's a million statistics that can show how much more supportive it is. But do people really believe it when they buy it? And do they get some reward out of feeling that versus just the constant negativity of why every purchase in their life is destroying the world? The gas station, pick up the grocery store, it's all, I'm doing everything wrong, right? How can we help people feel like they have a bit of a tool of change, which they do, although it can often feel like you don't in the big world.
Well, and I think part of it is, and then goes to the investment component of it, whether it's time or money or whatever, and then what the return is, and the idea that it needs to be dollars and cents. It's so shallow. I mean, we all know it's shallow. Like, you can give somebody $1 million and it'll be spent very quickly, and it'll be like, oh, okay, well, you're just back into the same spot you were. You've had $1 million go through your hand, and then you've got this type of project where you're actually getting the reward everywhere, and there's so little energy towards it as a society, when you talk about the government component of it, and applying real action. to the crisis. They call it a crisis. It's just like the opioid crisis. It's been more and more people are dying every month since they've ever declared it an emergency, and yet we're still, oh yeah, you just become numb to it.
Is the solution growing poppies on rooftops?
Like a heroin trade? Where are you
I don't
going
know.
with
We're
this?
thinking local. My patron number again is
No, but I guess I guess where I get frustrated because I get so excited about hearing this, and I'm involved in it. Like it's not like but I'm now I gotta quit my job and just be more a part of it.
I got a spot for you at the farm, Kalen.
Yeah, and I'm like I'm gonna go farm. See me down there.
Go get your nails
We'll be up in
dirty.
Comox. Yeah, we'll be.
Well,
we'll
I'm
be
just
starting
like
it.
there's so many cool things, and it's people just need to shift their thinking, and I just see such an amazing opportunity to feel better about the world, that isn't listening to the social media, and kind of circling back to what we started the conversation about is like, this is something actionable. And you know what? You may not make $1 million doing it, but you're going to fill your bucket. You're going to fill other people's bucket. You're actually going to make a difference to the people that need it for food, and also support, because you do also support other infrastructure. When we talk about the the collaboration of the food hub.
Yeah, the Southern Vancouver
Southern
Farm
Vancouver
Hub.
Food Hub. There's so many names.
And acronyms.
And acronyms.
And it doesn't necessarily take a group to do this. I can't help but think that individuals are so powerful, and it makes me think
100%.
of a good pal of mine in Nicaragua who built a greenhouse and a hydroponic system that grows these beautiful greens. Because in the capital, in Managua, you can't buy nice greens. All of them are basically grocery store ones, but they're gross. They're brown and gross. His are the only ones with root systems still attached, and they're live.
Yeah.
And it looks like the
They're
healthiest
fragrant,
thing.
and they have texture. And, they
Yeah,
have
and
structure.
they look like the best thing in the grocery store, and he's got that market nailed. One person. But he's changing the conversation about what quality food means in this country to these people in an urban environment. He grows them out in the country, but he drives them into town, and it's amazing. He's now tripled his output or something in the last couple of years, and he's one guy.
See, this is a prime
love that.
example of action, and it doesn't need to be big, drawn out. You don't need to invest billions of dollars. You can just actually do this, and then we've done it on a shoestring. And we've had help because we've gotten grants and we've gotten this stuff. The Big Wheel Community Foundation contributes to this program. That's what gets me excited. It gets me way more excited than selling cheeseburgers.
Yeah, and to your point, Chris Hildreth did it without any agricultural experience while working as a server, going to school, and just was surprised that chefs were talking trash about how poor the greens were that they were getting in their restaurants. And he was like, well, why don't you grow something nice? And they're like, oh, there are local farmers, but they're just it's just, to your point, such a nightmare comparison to
hard.
use a staple product that you're going to rely upon that's going to change with the season. It's just difficult. And he thought, I bet I could probably figure this out, and got someone to agree to let him put 600 containers on a rooftop that he got there. He moved them through a window. They didn't even have door access.
Yeah,
and it worked.
that's
It just took
crazy.
one guy. And they figured it out, and they got on relationships, and he knocked on Bosa's door, and he jokes that he had a suit in his pickup truck when he was covered in dirt, and quickly changed into the suit and ran inside. And he got the yes that needed to start it, and it was just one yes. And I think we're hopefully going to be able to amplify so much impact just because of, to your point, that one person that decided to make a difference.
Now, would you guys be willing to come up with a business plan like how to build a green wall in a restaurant and then sell that green wall so people, and have different sizes for different uses, but something that any restaurant could just slap on the back of their wall? It's got a pump, feeds the hydroponic
Probably it's
system.
capacity, I would think. Those walls wouldn't produce enough. I mean, it would be...
But maybe they could. Maybe it augments how much they have to depend on Cisco, and it branches them off to going, okay, well, we're doing this. Now we only need a bit more to get from topsoil or the Fed or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think those
then
things
they just
are...
have to top up a little bit, and that way the onus isn't so heavily on the farms that you're working on, but you're spreading the knowledge and education and a system that other people can use.
Yeah, and I think to your point as well, Kalen, about the capacity, the size is always a question mark. But I think it's always a question mark when you talk about what particular crop you're growing. For example, we grow shiso, which is a type of Japanese mint, would be probably the easiest synonym for it, and it's very difficult to find. It's apparently fairly difficult to grow, although we seem to have no problem at all growing it. And someone came by our market and said, pretty much gave me that you have shiso. Yeah, and bought everything I had and came back with their family the next day and cut every piece of plant that I had in the field. I probably could have said it was $1,000 an ounce, and they would have said yes because they're very excited. They said we can't find it elsewhere. It's not that we like this market. Like, we cannot find this product. It's not a market for it at Cisco, and they really want it. And
it's fresh.
It sounded like it also, but particularly had a cultural significance as well. It was difficult to find. So what unique product could that restaurant grow that's going to be worth it to grow on that wall?
Yeah,
right? Like, how
that's
can
a good
we
example.
think about,
Yeah.
are we spending an incredible amount of money on wasabi? Is it possible to do that on a small scale? Interesting opportunities. I think in the same vein, when you talk about competing with the Cisco or changing the food system, Victoria doesn't have a food co-op grocery store, and there's some calls at the moment to change that. There's examples in Seattle and the Kootenays as well, but the equivalent of the co-op gas station. The big part being a place for local suppliers to have a grocery store style market and an opportunity to sell to the Victoria community. A lot of people in Victoria that live in Victoria actually drive outside of the municipality to go to a grocery store that they like. There aren't a lot of grocery stores in Victoria in the actual municipality, but there also aren't any in the region that have this more sustainability focused as well. Oftentimes there's reduced use on single-use plastic, much better farmer relationships, really truly a different kind of experience than your big retail grocery stores. And so that's another kind of way where individual consumers at a much larger range can have an impact if you start seeing those kind of retail different opportunities, showing people why going to the food co-op is maybe a much more impactful way to spend your money, and trying to convince them of that story of why. I think could be a pretty quick way to shift those things if we can get something like that moving.
Have you seen the guy on TikTok or some social media? He's out of Surrey or Delta maybe. And
The potato farmer?
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's calling on his neighbors and everyone to come just fill the bins, and everyone come down and help themselves. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so that's a really good example of some of the checks and controls in the food system that make it really difficult to be a farmer. Oftentimes, and those free potato days that they're running are because they are either blemished or deformed potatoes that have no market value. So at that opportunity, although they're still doing a fantastic thing, and I wouldn't have anything bad to say about it, but they're probably actually mitigating a lot of their losses by not having to deal with what is now a waste product. They're still edible, they're still completely fine, but to pay to store them, to move them out of storage, to get rid of them, to even compost them, it's going to be associated costs. Versus, it seems crazy that we have the kind of food system that it would make more sense to give the healthy, edible food away for free than to get rid of it.
Like, there's such a mind.
Yeah.
Well, when you think
Like,
about, you gotta
can't-
pay somebody. Like,
can't.
shipping is like so expensive. Like, that's one of the biggest barriers.
Because they might look a little funny.
Yeah.
When clearly the people who are picking them up for free don't seem to mind at all. And they've also now added a donation opportunity too, where they can tell you what the price would be, and you can either pay to help make more free potatoes for other people later on. And they're getting an incredible amount of sales, at least from what I've seen as well.
That makes a lot of. I think France has a it's illegal to discard, ugly fruit, ugly vegetables. Like, it's illegal.
Yeah.
Like, you actually have to sell it. I believe.
Yeah. Well, the French farmers are famous for letting their mind be known when they disagree with some rulings. And they have some of the strongest agricultural rulings. When you put 6 inches of manure down on a highway for 20 miles, you get people changing your mind pretty quickly.
You get results, right?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily advocating for civil disobedience, but the French they've been able to figure out that there's a priority there, and that any other ruling hurts the farmer.
Yeah.
Who's making a product that is edible and healthy at a time where, to your point earlier, we're dying for healthier food at a premium.
Well, you see the impact too, because food costs in France are a lot lower, and the accessible part of it, like, you can walk. I know this because Jan, my GM, is living in France, and him and his wife, and you just see. I hate watching their Instagram. It's like,
yeah, absolutely.
Where are we living? We're living in a third world when it comes to access to this type of really cool, good food, cheap.
And
right?
Is that not a baseline issue? I mean, everything we've talked about are solutions to high cost of food, accessibility of food, and the environment. Is not throwing away food from a grocery store, is that not a base issue here? And what can we do about that? I mean, not only have the grocery stores, here, I'm going to get on my soapbox here, not only have they increased the food prices since the pandemic to unrealistic amounts for most people to afford, but they continue to throw away tons of food and then lock up their garbages so no one can get it. So that feels to me like it's a conspiratorial way of controlling pricing, and that feels criminal.
It's there's multi issues there, right?
I'm sure.
And none of them are good. They're all fixable.
But isn't that like the baseline issue? Like if you solve that,
No, sure. I think
wouldn't that would permeate up and solve lots of other issues?
Maybe. But I think it starts with at the ground level and the community level. It's the stuff that, Fed is working on, and that I know Loaves and Fishes out of Nanaimo supports food banking all up and down the island, and they pick up food from grocery stores that are left over, and they repackage it and clean it, and then it goes to food banks. So there is a possibility along that. So I think it's very easily fixable. But then you go to certain communities where there's security, like there's practical reasons why you can't do it, and you also got health, and you got safety issues when it comes to food, right? Because you can eat food that can make you sick, right? So I think there's some practical things, and I think it's dangerous I think you got to start on the bottom and build it up, because it's dangerous to look at that example as far as they lock up their bins. Well, you don't necessarily want people rummaging through the garbage, and this is not a human existence. Like what you want to do is you want to encourage these grocery stores to provide their ugly food.
They should highlight them.
Well, they should highlight it. They should have a section in their stores that allow people who are like-minded.
Yeah,
that
it's like
want
50% off, 75%
Yeah, or you don't even need to do
off.
that. You just, sure, maybe there's, or you're giving it to food banks, and there's food bank infrastructure, but it starts with somebody getting a truck.
Yeah.
And going to each place and then knocking on the door and saying, hey, I want to take your food away from you. It saves them money from discarding it. If you look at, we used to have like 15-ounce fries at Big Wheel Burger, and nobody could eat them.
Yes.
So
exactly.
you're then 5 ounces of fries for every person that came in was being chucked into our compost, right? Then we're paying $180, $80 a bin, or $60 a bin, or whatever we're paying for compost to be removed, right? So you look at the cost of what you talked about, cost of getting rid of waste, it's negligible. So we went to a 10-ounce fry, right? We charged the same. The customer still had a little bit left over, but we saved money on the composting component of it, right?
Right.
And so it was a win-win. It's all about expectations and capacity, right? And then not all things like giving 15-ounce fries, is a good thing, because it's waste. There's so much waste built in all throughout, and then you don't have incentives. Yeah. Right?
The world used to be covered in copper and tin all over the ground, right? Until we started to put a value on what that waste material was like, and it was rare to see some copper and things lying around. I think hopefully plastic will go a similar way, and hopefully food can as well. Thinking about if I'm sure to your point, there's nuances to changing what the value of that kind of waste item is. But if there is a dollar value on pound of food thrown out equals this dollar, you'll definitely have a lot more business minds starting to think about how can we reduce that dollar number in terms of waste.
And then all the other benefits of it.
Absolutely.
And even when you come to the why, like why me as a business person who's trying to make money? Why do I get involved in any of this kind of stuff? And it's all, the story has value.
Sure.
Right. So we're creating an area in Southern Vancouver Island that creates a story to the world. So you look at these impact conferences that we talked about earlier. There's people flying in from around the globe to participate and see what we're doing in Southern Vancouver Island and how they can emulate that in their own community to build their tourism trade, but also make effective change, which is a story. And that was the original thought with the Fed carbon neutral district, was that would make an amazing story, which then you get to sell product based on that amazing story, but you're also doing something that doesn't immediately return a benefit. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you're selling something for $2 that you paid $1 for. It's like you're probably paying $3 for a $2 return.
Maybe in the future.
The future.
Yeah, community investment.
It's community investment. And I think that ticking all the boxes on all those extra value things is where we need to go with this, so that we can have more people like Alistair working in this area, more people like you and me that are participating in it and supporting it, because it's going to take investment. and investment in time, investment in money. But it's such an interesting topic, right? It's an interesting subject, and it's an interesting purpose, right?
Are there any statistics to say, based on population density, how much food you need to grow in that urban area to
sustain the
population? And is that reasonable or feasible?
Yeah, so if I'm going at like the really high level, outside of a really revolutionary jump in lab-grown meat, which I think would probably be one of the things that could solve it, urban environments won't be able to produce enough food for themselves. And I don't think it's something we should strive towards. But I think it's striving towards what we produce where. Grain doesn't need to be refrigerated. Rice doesn't need to be refrigerated. Could it be shipped on a long transport over the ocean that, if we look at the environmental input, could be quite small? What do we need to grow here that we don't need to put into 18-wheelers that we're pumping full of nitrogen to try to slow down the decomposition process? So I think it's mitigation and where is best. You know, there's always going to be a need for canola oil, let's say, in large-scale fields away from urban environments. But what are the things that should be closer to these urban environments that we're going to mitigate against climate disasters more often, that are going to be more flood resistant? What aspects of it? Greens feel like the kind of thing that growing the amount of lettuce that California does and then ships out. Before the recent flooding that's happened in the last 2 years, California had legislation to ban the export of lettuce because they looked at how much water they were flying and driving out of their state. Which is, when you start thinking, it is, it's incredible.
Basically, every head is just its weight in water almost.
Absolutely. And
Right?
so that's where people start thinking it's not about, we have a global food system. That will never change. It's just a reality of how this world has gone. But what goes where and why has been determined by convenience, price, and quite frankly, colonization. Places in France are a lot more of a regional food district that's in a local area. But Victoria, the value of having a colony out here wasn't creating a sustainable community that would be on. It's to get a function out of it. How do you feed those systems? The systems may be different. They might have shifted, but there's still that inertia that I think keeps a lot of those things going. Start being really critical about why do we grow this here? Right. And what would be the best thing to grow here, I think, is a question mark. What is Vancouver Island growing and why? And how can we shift those incentives to help farmers are growing the things that Vancouver Island wants to eat, not just the best thing that they can sell being on Vancouver Island, wherever it's going in the world.
Right.
And then working on all those surrounding systems like composting and, dealing with the food waste and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we have an interesting opportunity. It's just a little tidbit. I won't speak too much about it because it's an organization that's just trying to get off of their feet in kind of the incubator stage. But they're looking at trying to use a fast composting system to combine waste products from shellfish and coffee grounds into compost in a really short time period. Something that might be able to, with the city of Victoria, has some really big goals to try to reduce the amount of organic food waste that goes into the landfill at Heartland, in the actual garbage, by 50%. And it's one of their biggest contributors in the trash, which is a really big issue that they're trying to solve. And so the city of Victoria and the CRD, which is quite admirable, is putting a lot of money into trying to support people, figuring out how can you get less food waste in our landfills, trying to think about how we can start repurposing some of our waste materials on a local scale. I don't know enough of the specifics about it. I know that a Big Wheel Burger deals with some of their own composting, but our industrial composting system feels like another another area for some impactful change.
It is a low-hanging fruit because
maybe that's the best word for it.
We've talked about composting several times, and I get really angry when I talk about the lack of composting, and Heartland being 47% filled with green waste is
and the misconceptions around it too.
Absolutely,
One exciting positive story.
There's no slapping of wrists when these waste management companies go and just dump whatever the hell they want.
We are all carrot, no stick.
Yeah, we really are.
One thing that the CRDs help support, which is an organization we work with, which is really great. We have a lot of infrastructure right now, an accessible walkway for a garden. It's going to be built at Campus View School. The accessibility walkway is going to be built by Rewood, who is a charity of lovely gentlemen who create garden materials for farms or community gardens out of deconstructed lumber. And in just the month of March this year, they diverted 5 tons of lumber from the Heartland landfill in a single month. And so they've leveraged some fantastic individuals.
What's their name?
Rewood is the organization name.
Rewood.
And they're lovely gentlemen,
awesome.
and they use local contacts with landowners, people that own trailers, just like knocking on doors of buildings that are getting deconstructed and walking out with what is incredibly valuable lumber, but also is an incredible amount of mass that is getting thrown into our landfills.
And it just does, doesn't it? It just gets tossed right in there.
Yeah.
Hey, with that high-speed composting incubating company, if you want to pass them on to me, I've always got coffee grounds.
I would love to.
I would love to just offload. I can only put so much in my own garden.
Yeah, I can imagine. No, I'd love to. Yeah, we'll definitely connect
You
about
should
that.
see my garden. It's,
I would love
it's
to as
lush
well.
and very brown.
Alistair, this has been amazing. How can our listeners support Fed? Maybe get a part of that CSA program? Like,
Yeah, so
Talk a
we're
little
gonna
bit
be
about-
we're gonna be launching our CSA program, looking like just before, just in time for the Christmas season as well. And one of the things we're going to be launching this year is we're hoping to offer at least 10 shares of our program to people in our community for free that are facing food insecurity. So a part of our project and a part of the fundraising campaigns that we're going to be running through the December and January will be about selling our CSAs, but also trying to look at corporate relationships as well as individuals and see if some people want to support not just their own food boxes, but sharing the unique opportunity that urban food has, not just with people that can afford it, but trying to spread that around. So that's one thing we'll be doing this year, as we look to do more and more of those kinds of programs. But
Wouldn't that be a nice Christmas present to give someone? To give someone one share of that?
yeah,
What a
of
great
course.
Christmas
Yeah,
present.
it's an amazing Christmas. How does the CSAs get delivered?
so they pick them up at the farm.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so
it's
there's a
by
couple
pickup.
different windows and
Okay,
you pick
perfect.
it up, and I hear a lot of people appreciate that you can come by with your kids and swing by and pick up a bunch of decisions that have been made for you, not
Yeah.
walking into a grocery store with the
No,
awful
I
lights
don't
and
wanna
just
make
getting
decisions.
overwhelmed.
Decision overload is my game.
So there's that opportunity, and we all have volunteering opportunities at the farm as well as a really robust presence.
Educational opportunities.
Yes, educational opportunities,
Yeah.
volunteer opportunities, and we also have a very up-to-date and robust social media presence and website as well.
I was going to say,
get-fed.ca.
where are your ats?
And it is a registered charity, so if
Yes.
you do you can make a donation to help
Yeah.
support the cause.
Yes, we
It's
are
a
a
tax deductible.
CRA registered charity, although any sales that we do through our social enterprise are distinct because they're offering a product, not just a donation,
Yeah.
but we do have the ability to write the donation receipts as well as the CRA charity.
I love it.
Wow.
I love it. I love it. Alistair, wasn't this good?
This was great.
Is it a good show?
What a great surprise for me.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you had no idea.
I had no idea. I walked in here. I'm like, you got my doppelganger in here.
I
My
know.
friend
Well, this
Aaron,
is ginger
what-
power. This is what
ginger
happens when you
power.
get 3 gingers in one room.
Right? It's
Right?
It's hot stuff.
Yeah,
We
we're
have-
fixing the world.
We've fixed the world, but it just starts locally, right? And I think that's the most important. And read books, get off social media.
Put your hands in the dirt.
And but go online to get your CSA and support Fed.
Yeah. Sorry. What was the handle again?
get-fed.ca is the website where most of the links for that CSA sales will be done as well. But Fed Urban Agriculture Society, if you Google that, as well as our Instagram, is probably where we do most of our day-to-day postings as well. But I know it's a little. I couldn't do it without having to plug as well. I think the restaurants in town have led the way for us to be
Yeah.
where we are, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say that Big Old Burger has been a leading player in telling people the story of why food can be a an opportunity for change. And I think we wouldn't have been where we are without your support as well. So thank you for helping us do what we do too. It means a lot.
Hey,
Making the burgers big again. Here
I'm
we
just
are.
trying to do good in the world, guys. Look what I do.
We'll get up to that land in Comox and we'll sort you out.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I want to talk about that too. That'll be awesome. So we'll engage a little bit there. Thank you, Alistair. I appreciate you. Appreciate all that you do.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
for
being
all
here.
your
That
efforts.
was really nice to meet you and great. I learned lots. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I really
that was
appreciate
really
the
good.
opportunity.
Great show with Alistair, Sam.
I know, right? I was going to fist pump you, but I'm like, no, I better not.
All right. Well, we're gonna have we got a next couple of shows that are good next week. Oh, do we have it next week? The week after, we're gonna have Mara Jarnigan, who's been on Vancouver Island growing. She's actually off island now. She spends most of her time, I believe. We're gonna find out from her.
I think
I'm
Italy,
gonna-
isn't she?
Well, she's in Italy. She does Italy
food
food tours.
Yeah.
Really interesting. So she'll be
Fun.
on the 27th of November. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
Until then, be
Until
really
then.
nice, everyone.
Be kind.
I will.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye.
Bread and Butter Collective's membership includes the following local businesses: 2% Jazz, Bunny's Kitchen, Buzz Coffee House, Eagle-Ite, Big Wheel Burger, Blue Mountain Solutions, Bodega Tapas Wine Bar, Eva Schnitzel House, Farmsgate Foods and Catering, Victoria Chocolate and Company, Drum Roaster Coffee, Habit Coffee, Foo Asian Street Food, the Culinary Arts Program at Camosun, Cafe Fantastico, Fall Epi, Harold Street Brewworks, Hey Happy, House of Botang, Nikkei Ramen Ya, Jenny Marie's Cracker Company, La Pasta, La Rue Patisserie, Mocha House, Part and Parcel, Poco a Pinto Bar, Pizzeria Prima Strada, Keating Pizza, Roast, Table 9 Consulting, Sherwood Cafe and Bar, Sweets by Selena, The Collective Wine Bar and Kitchen, The Drake, Tapa Bar, The Nimble Bar Company, Ruth and Dean, The Whole Beast, The Wienery, Spoon's Diner, Truffles-Inspired Catering, and Zambries.
To hear more from the Bread and Butter Collective, go to checknews.ca/podcasts, on Check Plus, or find us on your favorite podcasting platform.